What's the word for something coming and going? Is it intermittent or sporadic?
Either of them work, I think. I don't
What's
know.
the difference
Sporadic.
between intermittent? Is that how you say it?
Intermittent.
I would say intermittent.
No, not itinerant. No, intermittent. I've got an itinerant sporadic cough.
Okay.
No, but it's sporadic, I suppose. No, ongoing, persistent. Persistent, I think is the word.
Okay.
Persistent cough. Anyway, welcome back to another episode of Tell Me Where I'm Going Wrong, hosted by me, Josh, and Sean, who is one of my best friends and also my ex. And we do this podcast once a week just to talk about whatever is on our minds, whatever is inspiring us or making us laugh or making us angry and depressed. So, hi, welcome, Sean. How are you?
Hi, I'm okay. I don't know, a little bit. I feel like I've done some really strenuous exercise, but I haven't. Like my hip is sore, my back is sore. You know when you get sore muscles as if you've like lifted something heavy but my hip feels like very sore to touch. And when I walk, it's all stiff, just my left hip. And it was like that yesterday. And like, is it just old age? Is this what happens when
Hips don't lie.
Yeah, well, is this what happens when you get older?
Maybe. I mean, yeah, my hips hurt not all the time. Like I'm sitting here now, I'm fine. But I notice, like if I go on a long walk, which I try and do, you know, every time I have a day off work, I try and go on a sort of 2 or 3 hour walk. When I get back from that, my hips are so sort of, I don't know if sore is the right word, or just like stiff. Like it hurts to sort of flex them. And so like when I have to like bend my legs to take off my walking boots, I'm like, oh God, you know, I feel about 80 years old or something. So
I don't know if it's the hip or not. Like, do you know, where's the hip? Is it like, because
the hip bone's connected to the thigh. What's that song? That kid song? Hip bone's connected to the thigh bone.
What's the bit where your sort of upper leg joins your buttocks, but at the side?
Yeah, that's your
but
hip.
Like, isn't the hip, like you put your hands on your hips? That's not that bit. It's the...
Well, isn't it the whole thing? Isn't it that whole big sort of bone?
It's like where the hip joins the upper leg bone.
All I can hear is that song. And all I remember are the words, the hip bone's connected to the thigh bone. Do you know the song I'm talking about?
I thought when I said you put your hands on your hips and bring your knees in tight.
Oh, the time warp.
The time warp.
Well, that's another reference to the Prince Charles Cinema, because that's obviously famous for the Rocky Horror sing-along and audience participation screenings. But yeah, do you know the song I'm talking about though? That your hip bone's connected to the... Is that just like a kid's song, or is it from a...
Well, I don't know. Maybe it was on something like Sesame Street, or I can't remember where it originated from. But I was talking to Hill about my pains and like back hurting, and his sister Gloria works in, I don't know, some sort of medical field in Mexico. And whenever you say something's wrong with you, or you're having a coughing fit now.
Are you having a sporadic cough?
I'm having a sporadic itinerant.
Itinerant.
Do you know when you say something is happening to you, or you're experiencing something? There's usually someone who will say, "Oh yeah, I've heard this is going around." You know, like they'll say,
"Yeah," but normally that's like if it's a respiratory thing.
Well, he said to me that Gloria said that there is some sort of virus going around, and instead of manifesting like cold, it manifests in sore bones.
Is that real? Is that a real thing?
Well, I don't know. I mean, maybe it is in Mexico.
Have you asked Dr. Google?
No, but I feel that it's a bit like that, like where it's a bit fluey kind of feeling. Like, you know, when you were sick recently and you were having the cough to end all coughs, were you also having those sorts of symptoms, like sore bones?
No, I was just like feverish, just unwell. It was all sort of, it was mostly sort of in my, when you have it all in your head and it's just like you feel absolutely like cognitively impaired. Like, like it was just, it wasn't in the rest of the body really, apart from the chest, like the coughing and stuff. But like, yeah, it was all mostly sort of in my head, like a head flu. That's I don't think that's a medical terminology, but but I've not heard
That
of a bone virus.
bone
That
virus and
sounds, that
bone.
sounds highly dubious to me.
What's that? What's that episode of Futurama where they bring this like guy back from the 80s. He's like a Wall Street, like Wolf of Wall Street kind of like stock market bro, and they bring him back because he had his body frozen with all his fortunes because he had a condition called bonitis. I think that's what it was called,
I don't remember it.
where he only had a certain amount of times for all his bones were going to disfigure all at once and he was going to be in all these weird shapes. And so he came back to life and he started a business with Fry. And and he he made this company and he sold Planet Express to moms. Moms that anyway, it goes on and on, but at the end of the episode he forgets to come up with a cure for bonitis. His bonitis strikes at the last minute and all his bones like crumble, and he says, "My only regret is that I have bonitis." And that's how I feel right now.
Maybe that's it. Maybe you've got bonitis. You'll have to get
Bonitis.
cryogenically frozen.
But so last night, we were hosting. You already know this, but the listener won't know that we were hosting.
What was I? I don't remember. I remember
the queer open mic at the Cock Tavern in Kennington.
Mm-hmm.
And when we were leaving and you drove off and you were giving Jonathan a ride home and
Mm-hmm.
I had to go and walk to the bus stop, it was very windy and it wasn't cold. It's been a little warmer than it has been over the last few weeks. But I was stood there waiting for the bus to come and it was windy and my bones were hurting. And I was just thinking, is this life now? Is this me, like this bundled up, swaddled like a baby old man standing in the wind
Mm-hmm.
in South London with just all of my bonitis flaring up?
Bonitis, yeah. Well, I mean, I don't think I'm not qualified to diagnose anything, but could it be like a form of arthritis? Because that's affected by the weather, isn't it? Like when it's particularly it's not. Well, it is cold. I suppose it's warmer than it has been, but it's still basically cold by any normal metric.
Yeah.
Maybe it's because I think that sometimes I was saying about why when I get those sore hips after being out walking for hours. And I think maybe it is just a very early, mild form of arthritis or something. I don't know.
But when you fall asleep, I don't know, you say you're watching TV and when you're a kid, or you fall asleep watching TV on your side on the hard floor, and you maybe sleep there for an hour and you wake up and that bone right there at the top of your leg below your hip, that joint is really sore from the pressure.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it feels like, but it doesn't go away at the moment. Like I've had it for like 24 hours, 48 hours.
Are you doing any stretching or any exercises to try and stretch it out, like in Abigail's party?
Stretch it? No, I am not doing that, but
maybe you should try. But talking of like lying on hard surfaces and stuff like that, like I'm shocked at how vulnerable my body is to things these days. Like if I lie, like sometimes I don't know, if I'm reading a book, for example, if I try and lie on my front, like if I stretch out on my bed on my front, or if like on the rare occasion that I might go to the beach or something and I want to lie on my front and read a book and have the sun on my back. If I lie sort of propped up on my elbows on my front to read a book for more than like 3 minutes, like I'm so sore afterwards, like everything, my back, my arms, and I exercise, like I do 6 days a week. I do sort of weights or stuff like that. So it's not like I'm that enfeebled or anything, but I don't know. I think it's just age. Like I can't, maybe I should try yoga. Everyone talks about the benefits of yoga, but
maybe I on the other hand am rather enfeebled, and that I
are you not going to the gym anymore?
at the moment I'm not. I went
Okay.
swimming the other day, but I haven't been back to the gym, and I wonder if it's, well, I don't know if I'm hurting because I'm not going to the gym. I don't know.
Could
But
be.
when even years ago, like when I was a school teacher, I
Hmm.
couldn't sit cross-legged on the floor with the kids,
Oh
like
yeah.
in the classroom. Like I
Well,
just didn't
have
have
we
the flexibility.
have we told that story of Tegan and Sarah on the podcast? Have we told that?
We have
Remember,
told some stories about Tegan and Sarah.
so this is when Sean and I were really a lot heavier than we are now. I mean, this would have been, I don't know, 15 years ago, perhaps. And so Tegan and Sarah are sort of queer, identical twin pop indie duo from Canada. And they kind of had a really big moment in the late noughties, early tens. I don't know, actually. I couldn't tell you what sort of era or what period it was. Anyway, they came to Brisbane where we were living and they did an in-store gig in this record shop. Skinnies? Was it Skinnies?
Um, yeah, skinnies.
Skinnies. So
Yeah.
in right in like the heart of Brisbane and down in the basement, down these stairs in the basement. And so we got there early because we wanted to see them. Obviously we were and we still are, I suppose, big fans of Tegan and Sarah. And so everyone's sitting cross-legged on the floor because it was like 2 hours or something until they performed. But we were so uncomfortable, and we were a lot younger then as well. So we were so uncomfortable sitting cross-legged. I mean, we just couldn't do it. Also, can we just talk about the pronunciation? Is it cross-legged or cross-legged? Because
I
it
don't
just
know. It's kind of like the way that Alanis Morissette would pronounce words. She says like syllables that aren't in them, like supposed instead of supposed, or
supposed. Yeah. I think
yeah,
it
like
depends. Isn't it weird with English how, like, some words, it depends on the context in which you and how you pronounce them?
well, would you say bow-legged or bow-legged?
Bow legged. But, if it was a two-legged insect, I don't know if that exists. But,
Like you don't
like,
say like silver-backed gorilla. You say silver-backed, or is it silverback
maybe silver-backed. Silverback. I don't know.
or
Um,
boob-backed?
Poop back. Anyway, so we were at this Tegan set. Anyway,
Anyway, I'm sorry. I just have to say, where the fuck is this story going?
I was just saying, like, there was the Tegan and Sarah thing. Like, so eventually they came on stage, and so everyone in the room in this tiny basement, everyone was sitting like crouched or cross-legged on the floor, and then Sean and I were just sort of like standing, like looking really weird, like standing like quite close to the front, but like sort of, it was just a weird, awkward
We
situation.
kind of look like older than everybody else as
But
well,
yeah, there was a big age
and
difference.
we looked less lesbian than most of the people in the crowd, and so we looked like maybe we were bouncers or
Yeah, we looked like
security.
security.
And yeah, being the fattest people in the room as well, we were like we stuck out like two sort of
Mm.
obese pelicans or something, just stood up
Mhm.
among like
Some
everybody in the room.
some two-legged pelicans
Two
with
two-legged,
bone
bow-legged, boob-back,
bone with bonitis.
boob-back, bone-itis pelicans.
Bonitis. Um, so maybe that's it. Maybe you need to go swimming again or do some like leg, I don't know, squats or something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I do need to get active again, but it all sort of fell apart when I went overseas on vacation, and because before that I was doing about 3 months solid at exercising a regular
Mm.
routine, but then when I was away I couldn't do it, and then it's been very hard to sort of get back into it. Like I'm one of these all or nothing kind of
Same.
people.
Yeah. I like thrive on routine, but as soon as something like throws my
Mm.
routine out, it's all over. It's all
Yeah, I'm
over
like,
a
oh,
red
yeah, I
roses.
don't do that anymore.
Yeah.
Uh, Talking of the open mic last night, how did you find performing your new song?
I really enjoyed it. I did, I did one new song, but I did two songs which I'd never done before live. And I really enjoyed it. So I think a few episodes ago when we were talking about interpolations in music, I was saying I was writing a song which was interpolating a Stevie Nicks song called Rooms on Fire. And so I did a demo of it last week, and I sent it through to Sean, who was not particularly encouraging, but I decided, fuck it, I wanna play it anyway, because I really, whether anyone else enjoys it, I enjoy singing and playing the song. I really enjoyed it, and I wanted to hear
That's
it
the main
live.
thing.
So I really enjoyed it, and I enjoyed my friend Jonathan joined me on piano, and I enjoyed it a lot. I thought, also it's quite an energetic song, quite a sort of loud, energetic song, and I think sometimes open mics tend to be quite sort of acoustic, ballady, sort of shoegazing kind of vibe, and I think it's sometimes quite fun to sort of stir things up a little.
Well, we actually had someone there last night who was the opposite of
Yeah.
shoegazing. We had this artist performer called Tin,
Mm-hmm.
who turns out is from my hometown of Brisbane in Australia. It was so weird.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't think he really sounded Australian when I was talking
I could
to
hear
him.
it. I was like, oh, he's Australian for sure.
Well,
he said something. What did he say? When the first thing he said when he got on the microphone, he said it was a real Australianism, and I was like, oh yeah, he's for sure. He's Aussie.
Was it something like one thing I noticed people from Australia say that no one else in the world says is loads?
Loads.
Like not as in loads, as in like loads of washing or loads in a sexual way, but
let's not go there.
To mean a large quantity of something.
Yeah.
Either loads or heaps.
Heaps, I think is very Australian.
Yeah.
I can't remember what it was he said, but whatever it was a real giveaway.
Talking of Australia, I had a message from our mutual friend Danny in Sydney.
Oh yeah, how's she?
Last night. And she is celebrating this year her 50th birthday.
Mm-hmm.
And it's weird, isn't it? Because we're both either 50 or approaching 50. But, when you don't see someone for a long time, they're kind of frozen in time.
Yeah. You forget that they're aging as well.
Yeah, and so when Danny said, oh, it's my big 50 this year.
I always thought Danny was a bit younger than us.
No, she was always the same age as me.
Okay.
I think she's a bit more younger at heart.
Yeah, maybe.
Because she loves Disney and Mickey Mouse, and so maybe she gives that kind of that vibe. But she said she's planning in advance. So it's in December, and she said to me, "Oh, if you plan to be around Australia at the end of the year, it would be really wonderful. And can you please let Josh know as well in case."
But what's she planning? Is she just planning a big sort of get together in Sydney somewhere?
She's hiring out a cinema in Sydney.
Oh wow!
And
not the one in Randwick, is it?
I don't know which cinema it is, but they're gonna have the bar inside the cinema for the party, and then she's gonna have a private screening of The Wedding Singer with Drew Barrymore and
Adam Sandler.
Adam Sandler, I think, must be her favorite movie. I mean, I always remember her liking it, but I didn't know it was her favorite. And so she was like, "Oh yeah, it's going to be in December if you can make it, and tell Josh." And I mean, it got me thinking. Well, yes, Danny is getting older, and it just didn't strike me as something that was happening. But also, I don't know when I'm going to go to Australia again. Do you have plans?
Well, funnily enough, like I was thinking, because I mean, it has been so miserable. I mean, I say this every year that I'm in London for winter, that it's just, I go through like an existential crisis every year of like, what am I doing living in a country like this? And so I was thinking, where are we now? Like coming up to the end of February, I was thinking, I don't want to do another winter in London. And one of the nicest trips I've done in recent years was 2 years ago? I went to Australia in January. I actually flew on Christmas Day. landed on Boxing Day or whatever, and spent about 3 weeks in Australia. And I was in Sydney, then I went up to Brisbane, then I went down to Melbourne, I went to other parts in Victoria to see my cousin, and then back to Sydney. And it was lovely because even though I got back, and of course the weather in London was still shit when I got back in sort of mid-January, just having had a dose of summer, sunshine and warmth in Australia just sustained me. It got me through. So I was actually thinking, I don't want to do another winter in London without going somewhere warm. So yeah, I was thinking that this end of this year, maybe going to
But
Australia. And
it's a bit early, isn't it, in the winter to go away? Because really escaping London winter, you kind of really need to be smack bang in the middle of winter so you don't then have a long stretch ahead of you when you get back. I think
Yeah,
that's the mistake I made when Hill and I went to Gran Canaria in January, was it? We went,
I can't remember. It wasn't
and
that long ago.
but it just, like, since I've been back, that feels like months and months ago. And I kind of wish I'd saved it, like, almost a little bit later so we could have gone.
You've got to get the timing right. Because then the other thing was when I got the great flu/bronchitis thing in January, I had been about to, sorry, I'm just laughing because like it's been, as we were talking about the weather, I'm looking out the window and it's been like really nice and sunny today. And then just in like the last 2 minutes, we've been talking about it, it's gone really dark and now it's like absolutely lashing with rain. Like it's like
It's weird. I
it's
mean,
torrential rain.
I'm in central East London and you're in
Yeah,
West. So do you think it's coming from the West? Because here it's
probably.
blue skies.
Yeah, well, it was like that. It was all morning. It's been beautiful. Like I went out for a walk. I had to take my jacket off this morning because it was so warm and sunny. And now it's so dark and grey. But what was I saying? Yeah, that's right. When I was ill, I had been thinking about going to Cancun because I'm so sick of winter. I'm so sick of cold, grey, days that last for about 2 hours, whatever. And I had been thinking about going to Cancun, but then I got sick, and then I was like, oh, maybe I'd go in February. And now it's kind of like we're coming to the end of February, and it seems like, oh, it's kind of pointless now because the winter's almost over. But then there's that sort of false sense of security, isn't there? Thinking, oh, spring's around the corner. But then in this country, in this climate, winter can go on and on. Remember that year when your sister and her kid came and visited us from Brisbane, and that was in April, I think. And we were thinking, oh yeah, it's going to be nice and warm by then, or and it was so. I think it even snowed. It was so cold.
I think when we went up to Scotland, and it snowed in parts of Scotland while we were up there, but it was freezing, and it was really raining a lot. It was like the perfect situation for a bonitis flare-up. It was really just cold and wet and horrible.
Yeah, it really was.
Do you think you would ever leave the UK? Or do you think you would now sort of live here ongoing?
I don't know. I think it's so hard to say with any certainty because I mean there were times I lived in Australia with you for nearly 10 years. And there were times living there when I thought I'm never going to move back to the UK. I'll never live in London again. And then here I am. I've been back for nearly 5 years now, 4.5 years or something, nearly 5 years maybe. And so I think it's really hard to have that clarity when you just don't know what the future holds. I mean, obviously my mum's getting older. I don't want, my brother lives overseas. He's in the US, and I don't want my mum to be on her own without any of her children close by at this stage in her life. So I don't know. I do think about sometimes if I still wanted to be relatively close to my mum, somewhere like Spain, somewhere that was just a couple of hours flight away. But I don't. But, maybe when, in the future, and it sounds morbid, but when my mum's no longer around, maybe then I would consider moving somewhere else. I mean...
But what's the difference between being, let's say, like a 4-hour flight away or being a 24-hour flight away if something happened with your mum, I suppose that's what you're referring to. And
Not just if something happened, but like if I lived a 24-hour flight away, it's not like I would visit twice a year, is it? Yeah, like that's not a trip you can afford to do either financially or time-wise twice a year. Whereas if you live just a 2-hour flight away, you could come like once every sort of 2 months. You could visit, or she could fly 2 hours, no problem. So, it's very different. I mean,
yeah,
and then the
I
other, go on.
sorry, I just don't want to. I've reached this period of my life where I don't feel like London, for a lot of reasons, feels like the right place for me anymore. And that's the weather, which we complain about nonstop on this podcast. It's the cost of living.
Mm-hmm.
It is the political climate. It there's
I feel like that's fucked everywhere, though. Really.
Yeah, I know, but there's just this magic combination of it here where I'm like miserable with no money. And oh yeah, also it's 2 degrees outside and raining. So I'm like, well, should I go and be governed by like right wing extremist government, but at least it's sunny?
I know this. Yeah. I mean, I mean, the other, when you were saying, would I live anywhere else? It's kind of comical, but like last year or the year before, perhaps, I put in a green card application for the US because my half sister, is a dual citizen. She has US and UK citizenship, and so
Yep.
she could sponsor me for a green card. And I mean, the waiting time for a sibling is probably like 5 to 7 years, so it's not something that's going to happen anytime soon. But then, of course, Trump, oh no, I've said his name, but Dump reared his ugly head again. And so now, of course, like I can't even imagine. I mean, I always had reservations about living in the US. I mean, we've spoken about it on the podcast before, how much we love, some parts of the US. Like we love some of the cities, we love some of the landscapes. We just, both have a deep, deep love and affection for California particularly, but that southwestern region. And so I do, and every time I go, I think, gosh, it's such a beautiful place, like absolutely stunning, oceans, beaches, mountains, deserts, forests, you name it. Like it's just such a stunning place. And I could really see myself living quite happily there. But then, of course, you look at like guns, or you look at politics, and you look at healthcare in the US, and you just think, well, how could that ever work? So, I mean, I don't know. I don't know where
Yeah.
I'll end up.
Yeah. I just feel like as I'm getting older and bone problems and whatnot, it is something that I have to seriously consider for my own comfort or my own quality of life. I think, when you're younger, it's easy to think, oh, that's just overthinking it, or that'll never happen to me. It doesn't matter where I live. But I'm cold and I don't have a lot of money, and I like, well, maybe it's better to be in a warmer climate.
Yeah.
And if I have the legal right to do that, maybe it's in my best interest to move somewhere that's warmer. I mean, healers from Mexico, and the climate is obviously better in Mexico City than it is in London, or more enjoyable. And there are other problems in Mexico City, such as the pollution. But I think I would have a more comfortable life living in Mexico City or Brisbane than I do in London. London is just a brutal situation. I mean, I'm always complaining on here about the buses and how long they take. It took me 2 hours almost the other night to get from Hackney to Shoreditch on the bus, on Friday night traffic. I'm not interested in doing that. And I know like age is just a number, but as I get older, I just feel like I don't want to have to put up with stuff like that anymore.
No, I know. Like it's a real not paradox, is it? Is paradox the right word? London is such an incredible city in so many ways. There's so much going on culturally. there's so much history. There are so many great, galleries, museums, theatre stuff. There's so much going on here. But I do feel increasingly, I mean, we've spoken ad nauseum about it on the podcast about how it just feels like London's becoming a city for the rich and how we're losing so many of these cultural landmarks. But London still is such an interesting place. And our friend Amy was just over visiting from Australia a couple of weeks ago, and she was saying how she loves it here, how much she'd like to live here. And you think, yeah, it's very different though, isn't it, when it's your day-to-day reality and you have to spend hours, sat in traffic or sitting at home like under the covers because it's so fucking cold and fuel costs are so high.
Yeah.
And quality of life here, I think, is, culturally it's very enriching, but in sort of other markers of quality of life, it's quite low, I think. And in fact, I read, actually, no, I was going to lie and said I read an article. I didn't read an article. I saw a headline the other day, and it said like our life expectancy in Europe is on the decline for the first time in years, and in the UK it's much more pronounced. That the decline is much more pronounced than other European countries. And I was like, yeah, I can believe it. It's sorry, I'm just looking outside. It's like actually it's raining so hard, like it's obscuring the buildings that I can normally see.
I think it's really starting to just rain here as well. It's come across.
You're probably about 4 or 5 miles away from me, aren't you? So
I don't know. I don't know what miles are really. I don't understand the concept of a mile.
Well, I don't know what that is. 7 Ks.
It'd be more than that. It'd be way more than 3 miles, wouldn't it?
Maybe. I don't know actually. What were we talking about? Yeah, life expectancy. But yeah, I feel like quality of life here in London is quite low. And, we've talked about this before, maybe not on the podcast, but we've got friends who live in other parts of the UK, like my friend Anna, who lives in Leeds. And I feel like people in other parts of the UK have a better quality of life because London is so expensive. And I think salaries do reflect that a little bit, but not enough. Like the London weighting, whatever they call it, that they add on to salaries and wages, it goes some way to making allowance for or accounting for the higher cost of living, but nowhere near enough.
Near enough. I mean, when I lived in Sheffield, and also, I mean, we should preface this by saying, of course, there is a lot of poverty and inequality all around the UK, and we're talking about people we know who are professional people who are employed. There's a lot of unemployment.
But they're not, lawyers or CEOs or anything like that.
If they had that same job that they have in Leeds or Sheffield, in London, they wouldn't have anywhere near the quality of life or the disposable income. So when I lived in Sheffield, I rented a 1-bedroom apartment that I think was about £600 a month.
Wow. And it was
now live in a 1-bedroom
city centre and
right in the city centre on the river. Absolutely gorgeous. Had been renovated. It had like underfloor heating. It was really nice. It was a loft, but like a studio, but it was very large. I mean, it was the floor space of it is bigger than what I live now in a 1-bedroom apartment. But the 1-bedroom apartment I live in now in London is £1,900 a month. So more than 3 times what I was paying in Sheffield. And I know that was like 3 years ago. But I mean, this is just I'm not getting paid 3 times.
And this is it. Like, I feel like people who live in other parts of the UK have more disposable income. Like, people seem to go on holiday a lot more. And I think people who live in London just don't have that. Well, people in similar social standings and similar professional situations don't have that kind of income. Yeah. I was listening to a podcast the other day, and there was an advert for, I think it was Lloyd's Bank. Maybe it was HSBC. Anyway, they were talking about this new account, and it was like, you get this benefit, you get that benefit, and I was like, oh, that sounds great, blah, blah, blah. And then at the end, they had like the terms and conditions, and it was like, account holders must have a salary or must be generating an income of £100,000 a year or more. And I was just like, well, who the hell is that for?
Yeah.
Like who do
I
I know
don't,
anyone in London who's earning £100,000?
if I do, they haven't told me. They're probably
Yeah,
too
I don't
embarrassed to
think
tell me.
I don't think I do. I can't imagine I
No,
do.
I don't. I can't think of
Like,
one person off the top of my head who I think maybe even, well, people that I know of, like, like our friend works at a law firm, and I know she doesn't earn that
no.
amount of money. Like, I know what she earns, but there are people that I've met through her at the law firm that would earn a hell of a lot more than that.
Yeah, yeah.
But they're not my friends, and I don't sort of hang with them. But yeah, like that guy that I met from Australia who was here as like an employment, I don't know, what do you call it? Like a recruiter, like he works as a
Oh, right.
recruitment specialist. He said to me, "Oh, I don't know how anybody lives in London, like under 50 or 60,000." He said when he advises people, he said they should be on bare minimum 60,000. I was like, well, I've never earned that much money in my life.
No, no.
Like, I've never had a job that paid me that much money. And I was walking across London Fields once, and I heard two friends just walk past me. Like, I don't know them. They were walking together. And one of them said, "Mate, I don't know how anyone survives in London under 80,000. And yeah, like, what are people
Yeah.
meant to do? What are working class people meant to do? Or people who are like partially employed, or people with disabilities or long-term illness. Like, I used to be a classroom assistant. So before I was a primary school teacher, I was a learning support worker.
Mm.
I don't know how somebody on that money lives in London.
Okay.
And I mean, we have a friend who does that for a job, but they
Mm.
live in council housing.
Mm-hmm.
So they have cheaper rent than what you can get on the private market.
Mm-hmm.
If they had to live in a private, like a
Well,
private,
yeah,
they would
they would.
not be able to afford to live in
They'd
London.
they'd have to be in a share house or something. And I mean, who wants to be in a share house when they're a grown adult? Like it's
I mean, that might sound a little, I don't know, privileged to say that. I mean, there's a lot of people all around the world have to live in share houses, but
yeah.
I think it's the sort of like the moral of the story, or what the underpinning thing we're talking about here
Mm.
is that you can be in full-time employment in London and not earn enough money to live a healthy life on your own.
But also, just to go back to that point about the share houses, like also I don't know if there's a bit of a I don't know. I don't know if it's just a London thing, but I feel like in London, the concept of share houses, like if you think about shared houses or shared apartments or something, you think about like friends or, this really romanticized notion of where you kind of like a few of you, a small tight group of you live together in this sort of utopian happy place. But like a lot of London share houses, it's so not like that. They're like these big sort of Georgian or Victorian houses, like 4 or 5 story houses, which are just basically just converted into a sort of bed sits. It's just, you know,
Well, wait,
tiny rooms, which have been like an old like drawing or sitting room has been like partitioned and divided up into like 3 or 4 rooms, and they just cram as many people in there as they possibly can. And it's, it's not of, like we've got a friend who sort of moves between places like that, and it's just, it's not the kind of thing you want to do. Maybe when you're young and you're just exploring and having fun, it's fine. But as as an adult trying to live a life, it's just not. It's really not.
well, we have a friend. We had a joint friend who lived just off Brick Lane a long time ago,
Mm-hmm.
who moved over from Australia, and they lived in. It was an ex-council flat that was, uh, like maybe a 2-bedroom council flat,
Mm-hmm.
but they turned the living room into a bedroom, so it was just 3 tiny rooms and then a very, very small kitchen and a bathroom.
Tiny kitchen,
And
tiny bathroom.
that
Yeah.
sort of accommodation now, you would be paying almost £1,000,
Mm-hmm.
up towards £1,000 a month to live, have one little room.
And I mean, I know this sounds hysterical and like sensationalist, and it's not. I wouldn't say it's like it's prevalent, but it's not unknown for there to be places in London where you share a bed with somebody who works night shifts. So
Yeah.
you literally, you go to bed at night, you get up in the morning, go to work, and then someone comes home from work and goes to bed in your that same bed. I mean, it's not, and so I wouldn't say it's common, but it's not completely unknown. So
Yeah.
it's just, yeah, the situation here is, and yes, you're right. Like we do have to recognize, acknowledge a level of privilege because there are some people in the world who, don't have access to, any of these things like maybe running water or hot water or, and yes, like, that's true. But just in terms of like the wealth disparity within the UK, London is just off the charts ridiculous.
Do you to change subject here? Have you seen that I'm trying to start another feud with Boy George?
No, what's this time?
Boy George posted a boomerang or a reel or whatever you call it on social media. I don't know what you call it anymore, but it's a video or a short video on a loop of Boy George hanging out with Marilyn Manson backstage.
Mm.
And well, I'm just looking at
Oh,
it now.
careful you don't play it. We'll get sued for copyright infringement.
So, Boy George official, and it's here. They wrote at Marilyn Manson, London loves you, and it's like Marilyn and Boy George, not Marilyn the '80s singer, Marilyn
No,
Manson and Boy
Marilyn
George
Manson. Mhm.
together, and all of the fans, most of the fans are going, "This is outrageous. Why are you hanging out with this person?"
Mhm.
And yeah, I wrote,
Was Marilyn Manson doing a gig then?
I don't know whose concert it is. I don't know. I think it might be Culture Club. I don't know.
Okay.
And I wrote a comment, absolutely horrendous human to hang out with.
Mhm.
Um, Boyd George is answering people, but hasn't said anything to me yet. But some of the other fans have piled on and just said, mind your own business, nothing to do with you. What do you think about stuff like that? So do you, obviously, I mean, the overused term cancel culture, but, we make our own decisions about who we want to support or give our
Mhm.
money to or listen to their art.
Mhm.
Obviously, like, I would never play Marilyn Manson music again after what multiple women have come out and said about the treatment that they endured at his hands.
Mhm.
But would you then extend that to somebody who hung out with that person or who kind of endorsed that person or excused their behavior? Would you extend that, or how does that work?
I think all I can really comment in is my experience and my reality. I suppose whether it holds any, truth or not, I think the world of celebrity is a whole different kettle of fish, so to speak. But personally, no, I wouldn't. Okay, even if I had a friend, so say I don't know if Boy George and Marilyn Manson are friends, I don't know. But even if you were friends with somebody and they were accused of things and by multiple people, even if you, on a personal level, didn't want to disown them or cancel them, if you wanted to remain friends with them for whatever reason, it's one thing to do that, but then it's a very different thing to then post content of, being there, supporting, hanging out, being friendly with them. Because basically, what that says is that I stand by him and I discount or discredit all the women that have come forward and have said, all these horrible things that this person has done. So, it's, yeah, I don't think it's cool at all that he's publicly supporting him. But then, Boy George, as we've said, is a very, what's the word? He's a very, not provocative, there's a word I'm trying to think of.
Contentious?
Yeah,
Like,
contentious,
he often says things that fly in the face of decency.
Yeah, he's like not a provocateur exactly, but he's provocative and I don't know, but
And that got me thinking about, yeah, like where do we go with that? Because I know that, I don't know, I really like Chrissy Hynde and the Pretenders, but she is quite
she
in the
said
pocket
some.
of Morrissey.
She said also said some really problematic things in the past about how women who've experienced sexual assault have to share their part of the blame and stuff like that, and it's just like,
Yeah,
come
or
on, like,
have you seen this stuff that's going on with Guy Pearce lately,
oh, what with what's his name?
Kevin Spacey?
Yeah, yeah.
And he said, yeah, like what he'd said in an interview the other day when all of these other people came forward about Kevin Spacey, it reminded me about what I went through with him
Mm,
on this film set.
mm.
And he said he broke down crying and it all came flooding back to him. But then have you seen this video that Kevin Spacey put out calling Guy Pearce a liar? And
Yeah, yeah.
Kevin Spacey is disgusting. Like, there's no way around this that he is, in my opinion, how do I say this without getting sued? But like,
The evidence is overwhelmingly against him, and
yeah, and it seems clear to me that he has been involved in a like an ongoing series of
yeah,
grievances
the,
against people.
and the
Or
court, the court of public opinion very much supports the notion. I think that he has been at very best he's been inappropriate, and at worst he's been a serial, abuser.
abuser.
That's my personal opinion. Obviously, that I'm stating.
And
But
so, do you know the actor Brian Cox,
mm,
who was in LIE, and I mean he's been in so much stuff, but I
mm,
think he's most famous at the moment for being in a TV show called Severance.
I
I've
don't know
not
that.
I've not watched it. He's someone that I've admired for his acting. I've never known anything about him personally or privately, but I saw a headline the other day, and once again, it's my fault for only reading the headline. But this sort of clickbait quote from him was that he was standing up for Kevin Spacey and that people should, not take things so seriously and get over it, and he deserves a second chance. And then I thought to myself, isn't that weird how I now instantly don't like playing cocked after a lifetime of, decades of admiring this person's contributions as an artist
Mm,
and an actor?
mm,
I now don't like him because of his vocal public support of someone who I consider to be a serial abuser.
mm.
And I think that's a legitimate stance to take.
And it's also, I mean, I don't know if we've got time to really do it justice, but there's a problem, isn't there? And well, all right, I don't know if it's problem is the right word. There's a phenomenon in society where we look to people, we put people on pedestals, and so if anybody is, famous, whether that's from acting, from music, whatever, we expect them to be pillars of moral integrity, and we expect sort of exemplary, can't say that, exemplary behavior from them. And obviously, but that often doesn't happen. And is that is the problem ours? Is that our problem for elevating them in the first place?
But it's like what you said about, it's one thing to be friends or supportive of someone in your own life,
Mm,
but I don't think it's unreasonable to want people not to champion people who are known abusers. I don't think that's unreasonable. I don't
mm.
think that's expecting too much of public figures. So,
Well, even taking the fame aspect out of it, there are people who we've dealt with in the past. I'm not going to mention names, but within like the vegan activist circles, there have been people who have been openly supportive of people who, like, I'm not going to say her name, but like there was that one woman who was having an argument with someone online, and the topic of Nazism came up, and she said, well, some of my best friends are Nazis. And I was just like, on what fucking planet, like, are we living? Like, on what planet would you... And also, like, I had coffee with a friend the other day, and like, again, I'm not going to mention names, but there's a
Say their
local...
names. We want to know names.
But there's a local group of like queer people, and we've sort of like, we've done a lot of social things together, and you know, we have like a WhatsApp group, which I have muted most of the time, like most WhatsApp groups I have. But you know, I had coffee with one of them the other day, and he said to me, "Oh, you know, he was upset because somebody else in the group had invited me and a few other people out to dinner." He said, "Well, it's not fair, you know, that he hasn't invited everyone in the group." And I said, "Well, maybe he doesn't want to invite everyone in the group, because there are some people who I don't really want to hang out with in the group." And he was like, well, "Why not? That's rude." And I said, "No, it's because they've said like racist things. I don't want to hang out with them. I don't want to be their friend." And he said, well, "Yeah, but you can't, it's mean to just not invite everyone in the group." And I was like, "No, it's not. Like, if you don't like somebody because of the things they've said or the things they've done, it's okay to say, I don't want to fucking hang around that racist fuckhead." You know, like,
And
it's
that's the
okay to
same
say that.
as that's the same as like these people who have been famous for a long period of their life. They think that they are entitled to remain that level of adored or famous or financially secure. But what they don't understand is people have autonomy over who they want to support. It's not about canceling someone. It's about doing what you as a consumer or an art appreciator feels like it sits right with you and that your moral compass. Why people think they're exempt from people making their own judgment about who they want to support or hang out with or buy their records. It is just, it reeks of like this superiority complex.
Well, I don't, yeah, I see the fame. I don't know if the fame thing even factors into it. What I would, my thesis, my argument would be that there are some people who go through life, and you know, maybe we're not to say whether this is right or wrong. Maybe joke's on us, but there are some people who go through life and seem to be happy to accept people around them with all of their flaws, even if that flaw is being a fucking Nazi or a racist or somebody who abuses people. You know, there are people who seem to have, from my perspective at least, no moral compass. And maybe Boy George is one of those people where he might, you know, he who knows, he could be friends with like Evan Rachel Wood or someone, and but maybe he's just like, oh, it's not my business to you know, I'm friends with Marilyn Manson as well, or you know what I mean? Like, maybe there are just some people who have no issue, no problem associating themselves with people who have been accused or even been found guilty of doing really horrible things.
We kind of like through the looking glass with things even mattering anymore, because when somebody who is a known felon and abuser and rapist,
Criminal, yeah.
can become president of the United States, it kind of like, well, all bets are off, you know, like who cares anymore? And so you've got like creeps like Kevin Spacey coming back and fighting for their rightful place in society because, there's a precedent now, and the biggest precedent in the planet on their side. They're saying, I'm going to come back.
There are politicians openly doing Nazi fucking salutes, and there's seemingly no fallout from that. I mean, there's outcry, but you know, they just carry on as normal. Like, there's no accountability, and
and then how do you feel? Like, this isn't a discussion to try and get like a definite answer to this or to say that we're right or wrong. I mean, these are all just our opinions. Then how do you feel about celebrating the art or the work of somebody who is no longer alive, who is extremely problematic? Like, I just finished listening to the Keith Haring book biography by Brad Gooch. I mean, it's one of the best books I've ever read. It was so fascinating.
Really?
But when I read it, it's similar to like when I read the Joe Orton diaries. Like, these are people, artists that I really admire, but some of their behavior was extremely questionable, like hanging around younger people and young queer people of color who were vulnerable, and there was an extreme power imbalance. How do you feel? How do you reconcile that with your sort of moral compass?
It's difficult because we always look through today's lens, don't we? We always look at people's lives. And I mean, there are so many artists, like, it's almost futile to sort of name them, but like, Madonna is one, somebody who we've idolized in the past, maybe not really anymore, but she has done a lot of problematic things as well. Like, there was that post she did on Instagram about that with her son, and she did, like, she used the N-word and stuff like that. Like, she's done a lot of very questionable stuff. But I can still listen to her old music. I mean, her new music is unlistenable to me anyway, but I can still listen to her old music, because I suppose I can still put myself back in that. And she, I can put myself back in that period of my life when I was a fan. But also, I don't think she's done anything like that outrageous. Like, if accusations similar to what happened with Michael Jackson came out about Madonna, then I would have to maybe rethink.
So in this Keith Haring book, there is there are stories about how Keith and Madonna, both being, I suppose Midwestern. I mean, no, I mean, Keith Haring is from Pennsylvania. That's not the Midwest, is it? But
Depends how far
both
west in
from
Pennsylvania, I suppose, but
both from
not
sort
really
of
though.
working class, middle class families who, moved to New York. And even though when they moved to New York, they didn't have a lot of money, they still came with that privilege and support of having white middle class, upper middle class families back home if anything went wrong.
Yeah.
And also they lived in the skin of white people who they weren't subjected to as much danger and police brutality and such and things like that. And so they both progressed in their careers at a sort of meteoric speed. Yeah. I mean, Madonna became, incredibly famous, and Keith Haring became like incredibly famous, and both of them extremely wealthy very quickly. When they were both in their 20s, mid to late 20s, they were hanging out with like Puerto Rican and other brown teenagers and having sex with them. And that to me is problematic. Like, there's an age problem. There's a power imbalance of class involved and race. And then there's also the problem of when they both started to have a lot of money and they could pay these, in some cases, children or teenagers to come and hang out with them and travel with them or come and live in their apartment with them. That's problematic to me. But are we talking about like it was a different time because it was the 80s, or I don't know how to feel about that.
Yeah, well, it is hard, isn't it? I mean, but yeah, I don't know. It's a hornet's nest. Because you could look at, like, there are lots of people who herald, what's his name, Wilberforce? No, is that his name? Wilberforce? What was his name? He was that English guy who, everyone says, oh, he's the reason we didn't have slavery in the United Kingdom. Wilberforce, I think his name was.
No, I don't know.
But like, then you look at when you look at like the way he lived his life. I mean, there are so many problematic things he did, and it's the same with any. That's what I'm saying. That's what I was saying before. Like, I don't know if we've got time to get into it in one episode about how we almost want to herald people. We almost want to elevate people and think that they are somehow superior to us in their thinking, understanding, in their morality. But in fact, we're all just flawed humans. Like, we're all, there is no, you could go through with a fine tooth comb, you could go back through our pasts and find loads of problematic things we've done. And we obviously, you and I both have quite a strong sense of like moral and social justice, and we are constantly trying to, you know, improve ourselves and educate ourselves and things like that. But, you know, there would be things that we've done in the past which would be, through today's lens, very problematic. And so, you know, I'm not saying we all just say become friends with Nazis or anything, but maybe that's the thinking of someone like Boy George, is just like, look, you know, like I have this friend, or maybe they're not even friends, who knows? I mean, you introduce the concept of fame and celebrity into the mix and it just becomes a whole lot more complicated. But maybe that's just how some people live. They're like, you know, look, who am I to judge? You know, that
I
I
just
don't
think
know.
it's a whole different level with somebody like Marilyn Manson. I mean, this isn't like he just said something weird. I mean, he
Mm.
has people saying that they were terrorized emotionally and sexually by him. I mean, this
Mm.
isn't, he just has some questionable opinions.
No.
He, he has been known to, I mean, he denies it. He says everything was consensual, but I mean, you don't get to this stage in our lives like we have and hear these sorts of stories and think, oh, this is made up. This
Mm.
is, you know, that's my
And
opinion on the case, but
yeah.
that's how I feel. You know, it's very, very rare, extremely rare that multiple women would come forward about one individual and there'd not to be any truth to it.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. Yeah. It's
Anyway, I highly recommend anyone who is interested in art and culture, especially of our generation, the book called Radiant, The Life and Line of Keith Haring by Brad Gooch is one of the best books I've ever read, detailing somebody's life. The stories in it are incredible. The people that he hung out with, the detailing of not only his, but so many other people in that world and their health decline and eventual death from HIV and AIDS. It is so fascinating. Historically, it is like an incredible artifact of that period of time, and I can't recommend it enough. It was just amazing.
okay. Gooch. I won't forget the name Gooch,
Why is that?
just because it's obviously slang for,
Is
you
it?
don't know that word, Gooch.
No.
Yeah, it's like I want to say it. I don't want to drag our podcast down into lower depths
Well,
of
I think I can
depravity.
imagine what you mean, but wasn't there a TV show or a movie that had a character nicknamed the Gooch?
Was there? Not that I recall. But like traditionally, it's like the area. Well, as my understanding of it has always been, like it's the area sort of beneath the testicles, like towards the anus, like that's your gooch.
There's like a famous Irish Gaelic footballer called Colm Cooper, and his nickname is the Gooch.
Okay.
So I wonder, put your perineum, is that what it
Perineum,
is?
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's like perineum. I don't know how you pronounce it, but
Perineum,
yeah,
perineum,
Peineum, right?
the area between your scrotum and your anus.
Yeah, your gooch. That's what I was saying. I won't forget the name of the biographer.
Okay, Brad Gooch.
Gooch on herring. Um,
Okay.
what was I was going to say? I'm listening to an audiobook at the moment, but I can't remember the name of it. So it's not very useful information for me to say. But I'm
Well,
just going to
thanks for
have a
that
quick,
story.
just going to do some live checking,
If
and it's
anybody, if anybody was to do a supercut video of all the times he's saying I can't remember, it would be like
oh, I
you
know.
could fill up an hour of.
Well, I mean, yeah, like I mean, I've said it on the podcast before. My memory is shocking, like shocking. Um, there are just things I just don't whole. I wouldn't say there are whole periods of my life that I don't remember, but I mean, there's a lot I don't remember. I mean, I think I've said it on the podcast before. Like, I between the ages of about 14 and 21, I smoked so much marijuana that I don't really remember a lot of that period, and B, I think it's probably done lasting damage to my sort of my brain. I mean, it could be other things as well. It could be the actual brain injury I had when I was 2.5 years old. Could be that. But yeah, I have a terrible, terrible memory.
Have you got? Did it give you bonitis of the gooch?
Gave me goochitis of the bones. And yeah, so no, I mean,
I'm also now an hour into this conversation, second guessing myself, thinking, was that even the term they said on Futurama? Was it bonitis, or am I saying the wrong word? Anyway,
I don't know. I love Futurama. I love Katie Sagal.
Yeah,
she's in. She's in that show, The Connors. Now, when Roseanne was cancelled. Speaking of cancels, they carried on with the Roseanne family, but they renamed it The Connors.
Is it still going?
And it's still going. I can't believe it's like it's like 5th, 6th season or something. And I was talking to our friend Laura in LA about it last year, and I was saying it's not that good. Like, it's not, the show is not that funny. Like, they really could use some new writers, but I still watch it because I have such affection for the characters, and I think it's really interesting that they do show sort of modern, the sort of spectrum, the political spectrum in America, and you can kind of, it's obviously a liberal, left-leaning show, but they do represent more sort of right-wing conservative people without mocking them, which I think is an interesting thing. Anyway, Katie Sagal is now a regular on that, so that makes it more watchable. But yeah,
what character does she play?
She's Dan's new girlfriend / I think they got married. Yeah, I think Dan's new wife.
Okay.
But yeah, it's good, and Darlene is vegan in the show as well, so that's a constant feature in the scripts and in the storylines and stuff. So
okay,
yeah,
right. Well, that's us for another episode.
All right. Well, I hope your bonitis improves.
I don't know what's going to happen. Maybe I need to put an ice pack on my gooch to I mean, the only question I have left is your hip bone connected to the gooch bone. Now that I've learned the word gooch, I'm never going to say anything else.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. We'll have to rewrite the children's song. Your hip bone's connected to the gooch bone.
Or my neck, my back, my gooch, and my crack.
My neck, my back, my anxiety attacks. All right, we should wrap up. This has been a very rambling. I mean, all of our episodes are very rambling, but this has been a particularly rambling episode. Where can people find out what you're up to, Sean?
Well, they can go to fatgayvegan.com or follow me on Instagram at fatgayvegan, and or see me at the cinema bar in December in Sydney with Danny's 50th birthday. How about you?
You can find me on Instagram at Josh and the Jumpstarts, or on Spotify. And I'm actually, you can, so the song that I was talking about where I did an interpolation of Stevie Nicks is on my Instagram feed. So you can go, Sean didn't like it, I don't think, but you can go on there and tell me if you like it or not. And other than that,
Are you opening yourself up to criticism? Are you asking the listeners to tell you where you're going wrong with your music?
Absolutely, yeah. Tell me if you like it, tell me if you don't. But yeah, other than that, you can find me on Spotify with all my other recorded songs, and you can subscribe to this podcast on Spotify or on YouTube, and please leave us a comment as well. We do respond to comments. And yeah, we'll be back in your feed this time next week, still moaning about the weather and about the cost of living
and bonitis,
about getting old. Yeah. All right, folks, take care, and until then, we'll see you next week.
All right.
Bye-bye.